1. The wake-up call, embracing the quiet. You wake up, no alarms, no notifications buzzing, no one tagging you, no group chat lighting up with some half-interesting meme, just stillness. And at first, it's kind of nice. Peaceful even, but then it creeps in that weird tension. A flicker of unease. That quiet starts to feel unfamiliar, unnatural, almost. And then it hits you. That whisper in your chest. Am I even on anyone's mind right now? That's the moment most men reach for the escape hatch. They grab their phone, scroll aimlessly. Maybe send a text they'll regret. Maybe go down a rabbit hole on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, anything to feel some kind of spark. Some kind of signal that they still matter. Because we've been trained to believe that silence is the enemy. That quiet equals loneliness. That if no one's calling, no one's watching your story, no one's texting good morning, then maybe you're falling behind. Maybe you're invisible. Maybe you're just not enough. But let's flip that idea on its head for a second. What if the silence isn't a red flag? What if it's a door? And what if most men are just too scared to walk through it? See, the world doesn't teach you how to be alone. It teaches you how to perform, how to impress, how to win attention and keep it. But it never teaches you what happens when all of that stops, when there's no audience, no applause, and nothing to prove. Here's the thing. The man who learns to sit with that silence, who doesn't run from it, who doesn't fill it with noise or distraction, that man becomes a different kind of dangerous. Not because he's reckless, but because he's rooted. He's building something deep inside, something no one else can see. Most won't get this message. And honestly, they're not supposed to. This isn't for every guy. It's not for the one still chasing popularity, still bending to fit into someone else's mold, still waiting to be picked. This is for the man who's done with all that. The one who's tired of shrinking, tired of performing, tired of feeling like he has to earn his place in the room. This is for the man who's ready to stop running and start rising. In a world addicted to noise, where everyone's shouting to be heard, the man who chooses stillness, he becomes unforgettable. And no, this isn't about isolation. You're not cutting off the world, you're just returning to yourself. And there's a big difference. Too many men bounce from relationship to relationship, from job to job, from distraction to distraction, searching for some fleeting sense of purpose. Chasing validation like it's oxygen. Like if someone doesn't like their post, they might stop breathing. But when was the last time you asked, what happens if I stop chasing and just sit with myself? Because that moment, that's where everything starts to shift. Your mind clears, your standards rise. Your voice gets stronger, not louder, stronger. And the irony? The second you stop needing the world to validate you, that's when the world starts paying attention. So before we really dive in, do this one thing. Drop it in the comments seriously. I choose solitude to forge my strength. Not just because it sounds poetic, but because you're finally ready. Ready to stop hiding behind jokes, behind noise, behind "I'm just busy." Ready to stop chasing attention and start building something real. This is the line in the sand. Type it. Own it. And let's go. 1. The fear of silence. You're sitting in the dark. No background music, no podcasts, no DMs lighting up. Just you and your breath. And somewhere underneath that, something heavier. Your thoughts. And look, most men don't actually fear being alone. They fear what being alone brings to the surface. It's not the emptiness that's scary. It's the truth. Because silence doesn't just feel empty, it feels revealing. It doesn't shame you, it doesn't yell. It just opens the vault. And all the stuff you've been avoiding comes crawling out. That girl you ghosted. That opportunity you passed up. That promise you made to yourself last year, 5 years ago, and broke when no one was watching. You try to look away, but there's nothing left to distract you. No party, no texts, no fake hustle, just truth. That's why most men stay on the move. From woman to woman. From job to side hustle. From gym grind to spiritual TikTok quotes. Not because they're chasing something. They're avoiding something. Not escaping her. They're escaping themselves. Because silence pulls the mask off. And when it does, you either fall apart or you wake up. At first, yeah, it's brutal. It presses down on your chest. It makes every insecurity scream at full volume. You're not enough. No one really cares. You're falling behind. Why even try? But here's the turning point. If you stay, if you breathe through that noise without running, you start to realize something. You're still here. You're still breathing. You're still capable. And those voices, they're not you. They're echoes, old recordings from a life you no longer live. You don't have to open the door when they knock. And then clarity shows up. Not as some loud motivational breakthrough. Just a quiet knowing. You are not your past. You are not your regrets. You're not the girl who left, the job you didn't get, or the version of yourself that failed once. You're the man who stayed, the one who didn't flinch. The one who sat in the fire and refused to run from the heat. And that right, there is strength. Real growth doesn't start in a gym. It doesn't start in a book or a 3-minute motivational clip. It starts in the quiet. In the moment you decide that you are worth facing. So you sit in the storm. You let it howl. Let it stir up everything fake, everything you outgrew, everything you thought you needed. And you stay. You don't fill the silence. You let it stretch. And in doing so, you reclaim something most men never touch. Inner command. From that stillness, a new voice rises, not cocky, not performative, just steady. Just honest. And when you move again, when you step back into the world, you're different. Your presence is weightier. Your energy more centered. Not because you changed the world, but because you reconnected with the man the world tried to bury. Here's the truth. No one tells you. The world doesn't need more loud, reactive, attention-hungry men. It needs more men who can walk through fire in silence and come out with clarity. Because that man, he doesn't beg to be noticed, he becomes undeniable. 2. Approval detox, reclaiming your voice. Most men are addicted to something they don't even realize. It's not alcohol, it's not gambling, not even porn. It's something much quieter, much sneakier, and way more common. Approval. Think about it. How many guys wake up and the first thing they check isn't their calendar or their goals? It's their notifications, their messages, their likes. Did she text back? Did anyone comment? Did I get any new followers overnight? And it looks innocent enough, right? Just checking in, just staying connected. But dig deeper, and what you'll see is a craving. Not for information, for validation. Because somewhere along the way, attention became currency. And without it, you feel broke. This is where it gets dangerous. Unlike other addictions, no one warns you about this one. There's no intervention for needing to be liked. No rehab for people-pleasing. It doesn't ruin your liver or drain your bank account. It drains something far more important, your identity. Approval addiction is a shape-shifter. It makes you smile when you want to scream. It makes you agree when you're dying to say no. It makes you stay silent when your soul wants to speak. And worst of all, it feels normal. You tell yourself you're just keeping the peace, that you're being polite, that now's not the time to speak up. But deep down, you know what's really happening. You're performing, you're shrinking. You're trading who you are for a temporary, That's the prison most men don't even know they're living in. One may decorate with compliments. One may reinforce with jokes they don't find funny, with conversations that drain them, with fake connections that leave them empty. And here's the twisted part. The more approval you get, the more you need it. It's a high, a quick hit. That girl compliments your story. You feel good for an hour. You get 200 likes on a post. Feels amazing for a night. But then what? You're chasing the next hit. You're refreshing. You're tweaking your words, your wardrobe, your opinions, trying to recreate that feeling. That I matter rush. And eventually, you burn out, not because you're weak, but because the mask you've been wearing is suffocating. Because pretending to be someone else day after day, just to be accepted, that wears a man down. But here's the shift. The radical, life-altering move. You stop. You begin your approval detox. It doesn't mean you turn cold. It doesn't mean you reject everyone. It means you get real with yourself. You stop checking your phone like a lab rat hitting a lever. You stop tailoring your opinions to match the room. You stop giving your energy to people who don't see your value. And you start asking the one question that changes everything. Am I doing this because I believe in it or because I want to be liked? That question, it's a spotlight. It exposes everything you do out of fear. It forces you to look at the ways you've sold yourself short just to be accepted. And at first, yeah, it stings. It feels like withdrawal, like something's missing. You'll feel the silence, the distance, the absence of constant feedback. You'll hear the voice in your head ask, what if they don't like me anymore? What if I lose followers? What if I don't fit in? And you breathe through it. You let the discomfort sharpen you instead of break you. Because beneath all that noise, there's another voice. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. Your voice. The one that's been buried under years of performance. The one that isn't trying to charm anyone. The one that just is. And when that voice starts to surface, you'll feel something shift. You'll stop reaching out just to stay on the radar. You'll stop laughing at jokes that don't land for you. You'll stop wasting time on people who only show up when you're doing well. Instead, you start honoring your space. You start protecting your peace. You start becoming unapologetically honest. And people notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. A change in your posture. A new calm in your eyes. A gravity in the way you speak, because now, when you say something, it's not rehearsed, it's real. You stop needing attention. You start commanding it. That's the paradox. When you stop trying to be seen, you become impossible to ignore. Because men who seek approval, they fade into the crowd. But men who choose themselves, they stand out without even trying. Not because they're louder, but because they're aligned. They know who they are. They know what they'll allow. And they're no longer willing to compromise for anyone's comfort. That kind of man, that's the one people remember. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the most unshakable. Approval detox is messy. It costs you some fake friendships, some easy conversations, some surface-level smiles. But what you gain is everything. You gain your standards back. You gain your energy back. You gain your clarity back. You stop chasing things that don't nourish you. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop defending your peace. You walk into rooms not wondering who likes you, but knowing exactly who you are. And that presence, that's power. So ask yourself right now, honestly, are you still living to be liked? Still morphing to fit into someone else's narrative? Or are you finally ready to choose you? Because the moment you do really do, something changes. You stop chasing. You stop apologizing. You stop performing. You just become. And the world It watches in silence, because real alignment doesn't make noise. It makes impact. 3. Clarity through solitude. Hearing your own voice again. Every man, at some point in his life, hits that strange turning point. The noise fades. The calendar clears. The group chats quiet down. And for the first time in a long time, he finds himself in silence, not because he planned it, but because life hit the mute button. And that stillness? It's jarring at first. You've been so used to running, chasing deadlines, showing up for people, reacting to the next notification, the next thing, the next urgent. But when all of that stops, something else happens. You start to hear yourself, not the voice you use in meetings, not the voice that agrees to keep the peace, not the voice that's shaped by who you're trying to impress. Your real voice, solitude, has a way of stripping off everything that isn't you. The habits, the expectations, the masks, the noise. And for the first time, maybe ever, you begin to realize how much of your life wasn't actually yours. The job, the goals, the hustle, the definition of success, all borrowed, all inherited, all absorbed. You were living a script written by someone else. But in solitude, that script burns, and what's left behind is a blank page, a rare and terrifying gift. Because now you get to ask yourself, what do I actually want? Not what your parents wanted, not what social media says is cool, not what your friend group thinks is ambitious. What energizes you? What feels right in your gut, even if no one claps for it? That's the power of solitude. It slows you down just enough to notice your own heartbeat again. In the chaos, you're reactive, you're constantly adjusting, constantly molding, constantly wondering, am I doing this right? Is this good enough? Do they approve? But in solitude, those questions stop mattering. You stop looking for applause. You start looking for alignment, and that's when real clarity appears. Not clarity from a motivational speaker. Not clarity from a podcast or a book. Clarity that comes from within. From sitting in silence long enough to hear what your soul has been whispering all along. You start asking better questions. Who drains me? Who energizes me? What do I tolerate that quietly eats at me? Who do I become around certain people, and do I like that version of myself? And you ask those questions without rushing to answer, because solitude doesn't pressure you. It gives you space. It gives you room to breathe, to feel what's been buried under your daily grind. And it's not always pretty. Sometimes, what surfaces is uncomfortable. Maybe you realize you've outgrown your job. Maybe you realize your relationship is more about habit than love. Maybe you realize you've been performing as a version of yourself just to survive. But here's the thing. Discomfort is the beginning of growth. That discomfort is a compass. It's pointing you somewhere new. Somewhere honest. Because when you stop lying to yourself just to keep things nice, you start living in a whole new way. You say no without guilt. You draw boundaries, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. You pull back from people, not out of anger, but out of alignment. Solitude sharpens your sight. You no longer confuse activity with purpose. You no longer confuse attention with connection. You no longer confuse distraction with meaning. You begin to live with intention. Your morning isn't just something you survive. It becomes a ritual. Your habits don't just kill time. They reflect your values. Your space, your room, your mind, your calendar, it all starts to mirror the man you're becoming. And here's a big one. You stop explaining yourself. Seriously. You stop giving speeches to people who don't care to understand you. You stop defending your choices to people who only want to judge. You stop diluting your truth just to be digestible. You just live, and your life speaks for itself. People may not always get it. They might question why you're quieter now, Why you're not at every party. Why you stopped showing up for certain conversations. But that's fine, because rooted men don't need validation. They don't need to be understood by everyone. They don't need to keep proving they've changed. They just are. And that kind of rootedness, it's rare. It's the kind of energy that doesn't waver when people leave. It doesn't crack when people disagree. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just stands. Because now you're not living for applause. You're not living for attention. You're living in alignment with something deeper. You're living in rhythm with your values, your truth, your calling. That's what solitude gives you. Not loneliness. Clarity. It burns off the extra. It silences the noise. It peels away the expectations. And what's left? A man who's finally hearing his own thoughts again. A man who doesn't move like someone waiting to be chosen. A man who moves like someone who already chose himself. So if life feels quiet right now, don't rush to fill it. That quiet isn't emptiness. It's an invitation. It's your life asking you to slow down and listen. You don't need more texts, more attention, more plans, more noise. You need more you, more stillness, more breath, more space to sit alone and finally meet the man you were always meant to be. Because the man who walks alone, he's not lost, he's not broken. He's rebuilding, not for the world, for himself. And when you move like that from the inside out, everything changes. The right people find you. The wrong ones fade. And opportunity, it doesn't have to be chased anymore. It just aligns. Because clarity creates gravity, and clarity through solitude, that's mastery. 4. Standards over loneliness. Why choosing yourself hurts first, then heals. There comes a point on this path, after the silence, after the detox, after the clarity, when something strange happens. You start setting standards. Real ones. Not the "I deserve better" line you post after a breakup. Not the checklist you ignore because loneliness creeps in at 2 a.m., but grounded, lived, unwavering standards. And when you raise those standards, life starts to shift quickly. The invitations slow down. The conversations get quieter. The people who used to orbit you, some drift, some ghost, some get angry. Because here's the reality no one tells you. When you stop settling, you start shedding. You shed friendships that were based on convenience, not depth. You shed relationships built on distraction, not love. You shed roles you played just to feel needed, liked, included. And at first, it feels like punishment. You feel more alone than ever. Not because you're unworthy, but because your new standards are outpacing your old surroundings. And that hurts. Because you're human. Because sometimes you just want someone to stay, even if they don't truly see you. Because sometimes silence feels heavier than a warm lie. But this is the test. This is where most people cave. They lower the bar just to have someone next to them. They shrink their truth just to hear "I love you," even when it's hollow. They stay in rooms that drain them because empty rooms feel too echoey. But let's be real. Would you rather feel lonely surrounded by the wrong people, or feel grounded, even if that means sitting alone for a while? This is where your strength is forged, because the truth is, choosing yourself first often feels like losing everyone else. That's the cost of elevation. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with nights where you question everything. Nights where you scroll your contacts and realize no one really knows you. Nights where your only companion is your own breath and your convictions. But this is where something else starts to grow. Self-trust. You begin to see your peace isn't found in other people anymore. Your worth isn't built on attention anymore. Your energy doesn't leak every time someone disapproves. And in that quiet, you start building something no one else can touch. A standard. A threshold. A Boundary line. You stop entertaining flaky people just because they're cute. You stop chasing people who never meet you halfway. You stop explaining your value to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Because now, you're not choosing based on loneliness. You're choosing based on alignment. You start asking different questions. Does this person expand me or drain me? Do I feel calm around them, or do I perform? Can I be fully myself, or do I shrink to fit their comfort? And when the answer is no, you walk away. Not because you're arrogant, but because your peace matters more than their presence. Here's what most men don't realize. Loneliness isn't always a problem. Sometimes, it's a path. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's the emotional detox your soul needs to clear the old patterns. It's the fire that burns away the false connections, the fake laughs, the masks. And in that space, you discover what most men never do. You don't need a relationship to feel whole. You don't need a crowd to feel strong. You just need to stop betraying yourself to belong. Because standards are not about being picky or harsh. They're about being clear. They're about protecting the man you're building. And the more you honor those standards, the more you realize real love doesn't require you to shrink. Real friendship doesn't demand you to perform. Real belonging doesn't come with a mask. It comes when you finally take it off. So yeah, it might take longer to find your people now. It might mean more Friday night solo. It might mean longer stretches between texts. But when you finally meet someone who matches your depth, who honors your boundaries, who respects your path, you'll be glad you waited. Because that connection, that's not built on fear. It's built on freedom. So if you're in that season right now where the silence feels too loud, where the standards feel isolating, where your old circle doesn't fit anymore, breathe. You're not broken. You're just leveling up. You're learning how to live in integrity. You're building a life that matches your truth. And yes, it costs comfort. Yes, it costs quick connection. Yes, it costs some easy distractions. But what you gain is unshakable. Because when you finally stop negotiating your value, you stop settling for anything less than what's real. And real doesn't rush. Real doesn't chase. Real doesn't drain. It aligns. So write this somewhere. Seriously, write it down. I will not lower my standards to escape loneliness. Not because you're heartless, but because you finally know what your heart's worth. You're not the man who settles. You're the man who waits, who builds, who walks alone when necessary. Because he knows what's coming is better than what he left behind. And one day soon, when it arrives, you'll look back at this season, not as a desert, but as the forge. This is where you became unshakable. 5. Emotional control is power. How to respond instead of react. Let's talk about control. Not over others, not over situations, not over how the world treats you, but over the one thing that changes everything, your emotional state. Because here's the truth that most men never get taught. If you can't control your emotions, someone else will think about it. You get disrespected, your first instinct is to snap back. You get rejected, suddenly you're spiraling, questioning your worth. You get ignored, now you're bending over backwards to prove something to anyone who will listen. That's not power. That's reactivity. And reactivity is how the world manipulates men. It's how you get baited into fights you didn't need to have. It's how you end up dating someone who doesn't respect you just because they gave you attention. It's how you blow up a relationship, a business deal, or your own peace of mind, because you let a moment of emotion dictate a permanent move. Now listen, emotions aren't bad. They're human. But the difference between a boy and a man? A boy feels and reacts. A man feels and chooses. He chooses when to speak. when to stay silent, when to walk away, when to lean in. That's real strength. Not pretending you don't feel, but knowing when those feelings are useful and when they're just noise. Let's get real here. The world loves men who can't regulate themselves, because reactive men are easy to control. Advertisers love them. Toxic partners exploit them. Weak leaders use them. Social media hooks them. If you're the kind of guy who lashes out every time something pokes your ego, the world has a leash on you and it pulls hard. But if you learn to pause, to breathe, to sit in the emotion and not act on it impulsively, suddenly you're not reacting to life anymore. You're steering it. Let me give you a scenario. Someone disrespects you in public. That you feel that heat in your chest, that pressure in your jaw, that voice in your head saying, say something, prove something, don't let this slide. But then, you breathe. You realize this moment is not about them. It's about you. You ask, what response serves my peace, my goals, my values? Sometimes that means speaking up. Other times, it means walking away with your energy intact, because not every battle is worth your fire, and real strength is being able to tell the difference. Here's what most men don't realize. When you lose control of your emotions, you hand over your power. You make yourself predictable, manipulatable, weak. But when you master your emotional response, you become dangerous in the best way possible. You become calm under pressure, unshaken by noise, unbothered by petty disrespect. And that kind of energy, it can't be faked. People feel it when a man walks into a room and doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't get baited. He's not cold. He's composed. And that difference, it's everything. Let's take it deeper. Emotional control doesn't mean suppression. It means awareness. You feel the anger. You feel the sadness. You feel the urge to react. But instead of letting it run wild, you examine it. You ask, where is this coming from? Is this about the moment, or is this about something deeper? Am I triggered, or am I clear? You don't run from the emotion. You face it. You study it. You master it. And eventually, you develop something most people never will: emotional discipline. Not just in fights, not just in public, but in the quiet moments too, when you're ghosted and want to chase, but you don't, when you're doubted and want to prove yourself, but you don't, when you're triggered and want to lash out, but you don't. Instead, you respond with presence, with clarity, with alignment. And the world notices. Because emotional discipline makes you stand out. In a world of hot takes, quick reactions, and emotional explosions, the man who responds with control is a lighthouse. He doesn't dim himself, but he doesn't burn everything down either. He shines calmly, steadily, with intention. So here's what you do starting today. Next time you feel triggered, pause. Before you text back, before you argue, before you send that petty, watch this story. Stop. Breathe. Ask, is this me acting from power or from pain? That question alone will change your life. And over time, it becomes automatic. You stop being the guy who flies off the handle. You stop being the guy who needs to clap back. You stop being the guy who lets emotions drive the bus. You become the guy who holds the wheel. And that shift, that's what makes you untouchable. Because the world can insult you, ignore you, underestimate you. But if you don't hand over your emotional control, you stay rooted. You stay grounded. You stay unshaken. So let this be your reminder. Emotional control is not weakness. It's power in its purest form. And when you master it, you stop being a puppet. You start being a force. 6. Walking away without drama. Choosing peace over performance. Let's be honest. Most people don't walk away quietly. They slam the door. They send the long text. They post the cryptic story. They make sure everyone knows they're leaving, because deep down, they don't want to walk away, they want to be chased. They want to feel right. They want someone to beg them to stay. They want closure that looks like validation. But what if real power isn't in the performance? What if real peace is in the quiet exit? No announcement, no drama. Just a silent decision to stop showing up where you're no longer respected. See, the world taught us that leaving has to be loud, that we owe people explanations, that we need to justify our boundaries, that peace has to be earned through conflict. But here's the truth. You don't have to fight for your worth. You don't have to burn down a bridge just to prove you were right to walk away. Sometimes, the strongest move you can make is to leave with grace. No receipts, no ego, no explosion. Just the quiet dignity of knowing you've outgrown something. It could be a toxic relationship, a dead-end friendship, a job that drains your soul, a circle that only claps when you're struggling, but goes silent when you rise. And when you realize that, when the veil lifts, you have a choice. Keep performing, or reclaim your energy. Let's make this real. You send a message, and they leave you unread. You offer kindness, and they give you crumbs. You show up again and again, and they never meet you there. You can keep hoping, keep proving, keep bending. Or you can stop. Not to punish them, not to make a point, but because your peace is worth more than the performance. That's where true detachment begins. Not bitterness, not spite, but clarity. You start realizing that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Not every argument needs your reply. Not every disrespectful moment needs a clapback. Sometimes silence is your boundary. Sometimes distance is your response. Sometimes your absence says more than your presence ever could. And the beauty of that? It costs nothing, but it buys you everything. Your time, your focus, your freedom. You stop explaining your growth to people, committed to staying the same. You stop proving your loyalty to people who wouldn't lift a finger for you. You stop hoping people will change just because you love them enough to stay. That's not love. That's self-abandonment. And you're done with that. You're done playing savior in situations that only want your sacrifice. You're done staying in rooms just because you used to belong there. You're done giving second chances to people who didn't respect the first. And look, walking away isn't easy. It'll test you. You'll have nights where you wonder if you overreacted. You'll question yourself. You'll remember the good times. You'll scroll old photos and wonder if you're making a mistake. That's normal. Grief comes, even when the exit was necessary. But here's how you know it was the right call. When peace returns, when your chest feels lighter, when you stop rehearsing what you should have said, when your energy comes back, when your spirit feels unclenched. That's your body saying, thank you. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for walking instead of performing. Thank you for finally closing the door that's been bleeding you dry. That's when you realize something massive. Not every battle is yours. Not every space deserves your presence. And not every goodbye requires fireworks. Because sometimes the most powerful men are the ones who walk away quietly, not because they're weak, but because they're focused. Because they know what they bring, and they no longer need to convince anyone to value it. They don't leave with spite. They leave with stillness. They don't yell. They don't justify. They don't beg to be understood. They just go. And when they go, something powerful happens. They make space. Space for healing. Space for clarity. Space for better friendships, better love, better opportunities. Because when you walk away without drama, you don't just end something. You invite alignment. You start attracting people who don't need to be convinced. People who match your energy without draining it. People who don't need you to explain your worth, because they see it. And that shift? It changes everything. So, the next time you feel the pull to perform, to defend, to explode, to prove, pause. Ask yourself, do I want peace or attention? Am I staying to be seen? Or am I ready to see myself clearly again? Because choosing yourself quietly is louder than any argument you could ever win. So write this down and carry it with you. I do not chase closure. I choose clarity. And clarity doesn't beg. Clarity doesn't chase. Clarity just walks. And when you walk in clarity, you don't need to prove anything. You simply live and let your life speak. 7. The rise of the self-mastered man, becoming the man you were meant to be. This journey through silence, through solitude, through standards, through emotional control and detachment has one destination: mastery. But not the kind of mastery that the world parades around. Not money flashing on a timeline. Not a highlight reel of fake smiles and fast cars. Not dominance over others. No. We single quotes re-talking about self-mastery, the rarest and most powerful kind. Because the man who has mastered himself can handle anything. He doesn't need to raise his voice to prove a point. He doesn't need applause to feel confident. He doesn't need a woman, a title, a follower count, or anyone's permission to feel like a man. He walks into a room and he owns it. Not with volume, but with presence. Because when you've built yourself in silence, when you've sat in your own fire and refused to run, when you've chosen peace over noise, clarity over chaos, you carry something different. You carry weight, not the weight of stress, but the weight of purpose, of direction, of integrity. People feel it. They feel it in your posture. They hear it in your tone. They notice it in your silence. You're not reacting. You're not chasing. You're not performing. You're simply being. And that, my friend, is a revolution. In a world addicted to pretending, most men are fragments of themselves. A version for her. A version for work. A version for the boys. A version they show online. But the self-mastered man, he's whole. He's the same man in every room, because he's built from the inside out. And here's the paradox. The more he chooses stillness, the more momentum he creates. The more he lets go of control, the more influence he gains. The less he demands to be seen, the more people pay attention when he moves. That's what happens when you stop playing someone else's game. You stop hustling for scraps of validation. You stop attaching your value to whether or not someone texts back. You stop trying to win a room full of people who don't even know themselves. And instead, you build discipline, you build direction. You build an inner world so strong, so rooted, that no storm on the outside can shake it. Let's make this practical. You wake up early, not because it looks cool, but because you respect your time. You train your body, not to impress, but to sharpen. You protect your peace, not to isolate, but to stay aligned. You speak less, but when you do, people listen. You choose quality over quantity in everything, your circle, your habits, your ambitions, because you're no longer available for chaos. You're no longer hungry for approval. You're not even trying to be better than other men. You're simply becoming who you were born to be, and that is rare. That's why this path isn't crowded. That's why most men won't finish it, because it requires sacrifice. Not of money or fame, but of the ego. It asks you to drop the act, to face the mirror, to feel the loneliness, to confront the insecurity, to sit in the silence long enough to meet the man underneath all the noise. And once you do, once you find him, you never lose him again, because he becomes your anchor, your compass, your foundation. The world can shift. People can leave. Plans can fail, but you remain rooted, clear, unshakable. That's the rise of the self-mastered man. He doesn't need to control the world because he controls himself. He doesn't need to prove anything because he knows who he is. He doesn't beg to be chosen because he already chose himself. So if you've come this far, if you've felt something in these words, if a part of you has awakened and whispered, "This is who I've always been. I just forgot," then let this be your reminder. You don't need to become a new man. Need to return to the real one. The one that's always been there. The one who walks in silence, but moves with purpose. The one who loves deeply, but never chases. The one who commands respect, not by demand, but by presence. He's in you, and now it's time to bring him to the surface. So write this down, and don't just write it, live it. I choose mastery over chaos. I lead from within, because at the end of the day, that's what makes you unforgettable. Not your image, not your resume, not your possessions, but your energy. The quiet, grounded, resolute energy of a man who no longer needs to be liked, because he's already become legendary. If this journey stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Drop a comment below and tell the world what you're letting go of. Share what you're reclaiming. Own who you're becoming. Then hit like, not for me, but for you. For this decision. For this path. And subscribe, because here at Thought Haven, we don't chase noise. We build men who lead from the inside out. This is your time. No more hiding. No more apologizing. No more shrinking. Just mastery. Just strength. Just you, fully, finally, and powerfully you.